Welcome to this AV News video report. In this presentation we're looking at the impact of government spending reviews on ICT provision for primary and secondary schools in the UK. We're looking at the priorities assigned to ICT spending, we're looking at products that will be important next year, and we're also looking at the opportunities that will arise for the channel through a move to localised decision making. But first of all, I think it was a sense of relief that we all experienced when the government plans were announced. The news, I think, was far better than we'd all hoped.
I think the first thing to say, Brian, is that the spending review is broadly good news for suppliers into the education market. Education budgets have been significantly protected in the context of spending in other government departments. What's clear, though, is that with the demise of Bector and the government decision to deploy budgets directly into schools, the schools themselves are going to be looking to other sources of advice and guidance on how they should be making investments in technology.
As we speak, it's still relatively unclear. So the main funding streams have been identified, and the principles of more local choice, more discretion at a school level for spending have become clearer. But it's probably another 2 or 3 months, probably won't be till the first calendar quarter of 2011, that we really get a feel for how that will impact school spending. There are a couple of clear differences, lots of discussion around the role of ICT, the funding mechanisms, cancellation of building schools for the future won't have a short-term impact because there are 400 or 500 schools that are currently in the programme and will complete over the next 2 years. But there is likely to be some changes towards attitudes towards ICT and the kind of investment levels that are made within ICT in terms of the overall provision within the budget. So there's no ring-fencing funding for ICT going forwards. Therefore, speculative investments in technology are likely to drop off, but proven technologies are likely to continue to perform well.
So it's good news for school spending in general, but will ICT continue to enjoy the same level of priority that it has in the past? And what can resellers and integrators do to justify continuous investment in ICT?
The key benefits coming from the deployment of these kinds of technologies are about the teaching and learning improvements that these technologies bring in the classroom. We've done a lot of research, there's been a lot of independent research that very clearly articulates that the value that comes from these kinds of technologies is where they are deployed as integrated systems of hardware, software, and content. That's how teachers can most effectively drive up the quality of teaching and drive up, as a consequence, the attainment of pupils, the engagement of pupils, the attendance of pupils in school as well. So we really believe that the provision of an integrated ICT, interactive ICT environment in the classroom is the key to bringing value. And we think that's important because I think what's clear is that with the spending squeeze that we are going to see, being able to demonstrate the real return that comes from these kinds of technologies will be critical for all providers of ICT into education.
I think it's about having a clear value for the school and working with a technology that really has been shown to improve learner outcomes or impact the specific areas that the school is focused on. So if you take, for example, a school that's looking to improve its maths outcomes, there are certain technologies that are targeted to improving maths outcomes, and Smart Notebook Maths would be a good example of that. Now that's a software that resellers have not traditionally been very comfortable selling. AV reseller is more comfortable selling the smart board than the software that drives it. So the conversation changes slightly. If you can move the conversation to talking about the software and how the maths tools within the software improve learner outcomes, you're much more likely to secure a maths classroom deal. And that might be a different conversation from, say, a geography classroom deal. And as schools move their spending to a classroom by classroom level, there will be more of those conversations for the resellers to have. So it does reframe the nature of the conversation. I think it changes what they talk about. It's no longer about technology specification, feeds and functions. It is very much about, well, what are you trying to achieve in your classroom? And if you look, for example, at the FizzBook, the Intel Classmate PC, that's a product which we're seeing very strong demand right through the comprehensive spending review phase, when people are saying educational spending is uncertain. I've sold more of that product than I can currently get hold of due to very high levels of worldwide demand. So there is demand, but resellers have to pick their products and pick their customers in order to be able to stay within a sensible sales timeline. Otherwise, they're going to have lots of very long conversations with customers who say it's an interesting technology, but I'm not ready to buy. So I think it is about changing the conversation and changing the way in which we talk about the technologies and the products.
Our experts believe that the move to local decision making opens up the potential for resellers and integrators to reposition their businesses as trusted advisors to the education buyer.
I think there's a real opportunity for resellers to position themselves as trusted advisors to schools who are seeking to make decisions in technology. I think the other thing that's fair to say is that with funding being squeezed, there is clearly going to be a number of schools who are really trying to drive cost out of their ICT investments, and I think resellers are going to have to decide whether they want to be low-cost providers servicing large numbers of small buying decisions that we're going to see in the future, or, as I say, whether they really want to build close, tight relationships with a number of schools and really provide consultative advice on the provision of ICT into those environments.
I think as local authorities change the service that they provide to schools, and things that schools have previously viewed as free, for example, because they come inside their local authority grant, there will be different IT service providers coming into schools and positioning themselves as trusted advisors. I think there is an enormous opportunity for the AV professionals to play their part in that. By offering good advice. And the example I gave you earlier, a sports hall for an ultra short throw projector is not good advice. But talking to a school about leveraging their investment in interactive technology, adding visualizers, response systems, the classroom-based PCs like the Intel Classmate PC, all of that drives value as long as the conversation is about the educational impact. I do think that it's an area that we proactively support our resellers with. So we have a team of educationalists on the road. It's the largest team in the UK. We spend time out with local authorities and with individual schools. And certainly if you look at our education strategy group and the work they're doing with the leading academies and what will be the precursors to the free schools movement, those individuals are in the field, available to resellers to work with them to show them and explain how education is changing and how best to position the Stelgis product portfolio. Something like Iris, which is revolutionising continuing professional development in schools. That's a terrific opportunity. There's an enormous amount of money spent at Ofsted and at school level on continuing professional development. There is no trusted advisor in that capacity at the moment.
So how will next year compare with this year?
Well, the good news for our industry is that the budgets that have been announced show a very small increase in the overall spending over the period of the spending review in the school's budget. Now, what we will see, I think, is some of that budget being moved between different types of schools. The pupil premium that's been announced will clearly positively impact the budget for those schools that are providing an education to less advantaged pupils, to an extent at the expense of the budget of those schools who aren't. I think overall the news is the news is pretty good. I think what's clear though is that there is still a lack of clarity in some of the announcements that have been made. There's a white paper expected in December that we think will bring further clarity to schools on what budgets they can expect to see in 2011. I
think probably three things will happen. One, you'll see a move by the end users towards trusted brands. So without an advisor explaining, this is an opportunity, this is how you would use it, this is how it is different, I think we will see a move towards trusted brands, and some of the marginal technologies or some of the marginal brands in established categories will suffer. I think that you will see a number of ex-local authority and Vector personnel entering the market and providing consultancy services on a pay-as-use basis, and that will have terrific impact at particular areas where they're working. So if that's for particular schools that are adopting that, they will get access to some very leading edge thinking, but that's only one person then advising one school, so it will be possibly very patchwork. The third area where we're potentially working to close that gap is around our educational strategy team and the education consultants that we have on the road. They have good, strong, trusted relationships with the local authority. They have good, strong relationships with the schools. The relationships between our team and the likes of Learning and Teaching Scotland and some of the Scottish schools, a lady called Anne Forrest, who works exceptionally hard across the Scottish territory to bridge that gap. And it is about bringing best advice. Yes, we have a technology portfolio that resellers are selling as a result of that advice, but first and foremost, the education community judges you by the quality of your advice.
Let me thank you for watching this AV News video report and extend my thanks to Ian Curtis and Graham Wiley for their participation. If you found this presentation useful, AV News produces new video reports each month, which you can access from our homepage at www.avnews.co.uk.